All right. In the name of the United States of America, this court of the Eastern District of Pennsylvania is now called to order. The Honorable Jim Delapure, that's me, is presiding. Please be seated and cease this conversation. Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon. The attorneys like to introduce themselves, starting with the plaintiff.
Yes, Your Honor. Good afternoon. My name is Bella Salathe. I'm joined here today by my co-counsel and very good friend, Priya Wakama. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Together, we represent the estate of Sam Farnsworth.
Thank you. Defense?
Yes, Your Honor. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
My name is Kathryn Morris, and today I'm joined with my colleague, Ms. Parrish. Good afternoon, Your Honor.
Good afternoon.
Together, we represent the city of Philadelphia.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. Are there any pre-trial matters that are addressed right now, starting with plaintiff?
No, Your Honor. Pursuant to pretrial order 5, we have no matters to discuss right now.
Defense?
Same for the defense, Your Honor.
Okay, be seated then. At this point then, we will go into the opening statements, starting with the plaintiff.
Yes, Your Honor.
Counsel, whenever you are ready, you may proceed.
Thank you. May I please the court? They didn't give him a barrier. They gave him a boost. Think about that time. The world stops to celebrate. The ball drops in Times Square. Mardi Gras in New Orleans. Here in Philadelphia, that's any time the Eagles win. So imagine this. Super Bowl 2025. Philadelphia Eagles, Kansas City Chiefs. This is personal. I'm sure you all remember 2 years ago when the Chiefs broke this city apart when they beat us by 3 points. Everything's about to change right here, right now. It's the third quarter. The Eagles are up 27-0. Jalen Hurts drops back. He scans the field. He finds number 6 and he launches a 46-yard missile down the sideline. 34-0. And if you were one of the 130 million people who tuned in that day, you knew right then and there. Game over. Here in Philadelphia, it is New Year's. It is Mardi Gras. This is it. This is the day. For the second time in history, the Philadelphia Eagles won the Super Bowl, and fans in Philadelphia, they're going crazy. They're erupting from the bars, coming out of the train stations, from their homes, and they're running into the streets. Now, even if you don't even really like football, even if nothing I said to you made any bit of sense, we're all from Philadelphia. You know the Eagles fans, you know. They don't play when it comes to celebration. Sam Farnsworth and Manny Davidson, they weren't any different. Just on the corner right outside this courthouse. The two of them were standing outside. The Eagles had just won. They're watching as fans, they're jumping onto garbage trucks, climbing everything that they can see. And usually, Manny Davidson, he's not the type to participate in that. Today, something's different. He's looking at the light pole in front of him. He's looking right back at him. And he realizes there's nothing between him and the top of that light pole except a small metal fence. So he walks towards it. Turns around. To his friend. And he starts crying. Members of the jury, you're going to hear today that metal fence that they put around that light pole wasn't a barrier. It was the boost that Mr. Davidson needed so that he could hoist himself up on that pole, climb 18 feet up into the air. All of a sudden, Mr. Davidson, his hands start to slip. He falls down and he hits his friend in the head. And members of the jury, you're going to hear today that wouldn't have been possible had that barrier not been there to give him the boost that he needed. Now, as a plaintiff, when we brought this case to court, we walked in with a burden. We had a job of proving to you by the preponderance of the evidence, more likely than not, that the city of Philadelphia was negligent and that their negligence caused Mr. Farnsworth's death. We're gonna do our job today. We're gonna do so by asking you to keep in mind the barriers and the boost. So first, let's start with the barriers the city failed to create. Because this was hardly the first time somebody in Philadelphia tried to climb a pole. You're going to hear today that on Super Bowl Sunday, there were 100,000 Philadelphians swarming in that city. There were 200 cops. You're going to hear that barrier that they placed around. It's exactly what Mr. Davidson needed. Get him up onto that pole. So that brings us to the boost. Because really, those barriers that they created, that's not what they were. They were the boost that Mr. Davidson needed. You're going to hear that those barriers, they were flimsy enough to be pushed aside, small enough so that Mr. Davidson could step over it. Most importantly, they were the perfect size for him to step onto, boost himself up, climb up the pole. You're going to hear he wouldn't have been able to do that if it weren't for the perfect boost that he gave. Because they were never barriers. They were boosts. That's why. At the end of today's trial, I'm going to come before you again. I'll ask you to consider the facts and the law. I can find the city liable. Thank you.
Thank you, Counsel. Defense, your opening whenever you're ready.
Yes. Plaintiff counsel,
Your Honor,
members of the jury. They chose to cross a line.
we've all heard that phrase at some point in our life. Maybe even been told by someone at some point that we've crossed a metaphorical line.
But in today's case, that line was literal. Because when Sam Farnsworth and Lanny Davidson made the conscious decision to cross over a barrier you'll hear the city put in place to keep their citizens safe. Sam and Lanny crossed the line. And that line, they put themselves in danger. And that resulted in the death of Sam Farnsworth. But today, the city wants you to believe that the city of Philadelphia is to blame for the death of Sam Farnsworth. When tragedy strikes, it's natural. We want to look for someone to blame. Members of the jury, what the evidence will show is that if Sam Farnsworth and Lanny Davidson hadn't made the choice to cross that line, to cross that barrier, Sam wouldn't have been harmed at all. We'll prove that through three simple facts. First, the city had put extensive safety precautions in place. Second, Sam and Lanny chose to break and ignore those safety precautions. Third, because Sam and Lanny ignored those safety precautions, Sam tragically died. So we'll talk about that first point. The safety precautions the city put in place.
it's February 9th of last year. The Philadelphia Eagles are playing the Kansas City Chiefs on Super Bowl Sunday. The entire world thinks it's going to be a repeat of 2023, that the Kansas City Chiefs are going to wipe the floor with the Eagles, but Philadelphia thinks otherwise. Just like that. Right away, Philadelphia Eagles win the Super Bowl for the second time in history, and fans go wild. And the city was prepared for that. The city knows that when Philadelphia wins a league or a conference, it can get a little crazy right outside this courthouse. So the director of public safety for the city of Philadelphia, Walker Edwards, he made sure that there were precautions to keep the citizens safe. He's going to take this stand and he's going to tell you about all the safety precautions he put in place. Streets were closed to traffic. There were 200 police officers on duty. In every light post in City Central, there are a lot of members of the jury. He placed fences around them to make sure that there was physical distance between the fans and the light poles. But then you'll hear how later that night, Sam and Lanny chose to ignore those safety precautions. Safety precautions that were supposed to keep them safe. Because while celebrating in the streets, Lanny gets an idea. He decides that he wants to climb a light pole. So he takes Sam with him, and when they get to that light pole, they see the fence the city had put in place. Well, they don't choose to walk away. You'll hear that they don't choose to be safe. They chose to cross the line. And then you'll hear how because Sam and Lanny chose to ignore the safety precautions, chose to cross the line, Sam died. Because this man, he's climbing up, not 10, not 12, 18 feet in the air. He looks down. Sam, he still made the choice to stand directly under Lanny. And as Lanny's coming down from the pole, he slips and he falls right on top of his friend, killing him in the process. No one in today's trial will anyone in this world trying to convince you that Sam deserved to die or that Lanny meant to hurt Sam. But what the evidence will show is that it was not the city of Philadelphia's duty, negligence, that killed Sam. But the plaintiff, they're going to try to convince you otherwise. Members of the jury, they couldn't just walk into this trial and tell you that. They actually have to prove it. They have what's called a burden of proof. It's their responsibility and their responsibility alone to prove by a greater weight of the evidence that the city of Philadelphia is the sole party responsible for the death of Sam Farnsworth. And they'll fail to meet that burden. Because what the law will require you to do is consider the choices that Sam and Lanny made on Super Bowl Sunday. The choices that put them in danger when they crossed the line. And that's why at the end of today's trial, we'll ask you to find the city of Philadelphia not liable. Thank you.
Thank you. Give us a moment for scoring and sort of just look at me when you're done. This counsel, you may proceed with your case in chief.
Yes, Your Honor. Plaintiff calls Mr. Lanny Davidson to the stand.
And Mr. Davidson, please come forward. Counsel, you proceed whenever you're ready.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Could you please introduce yourself?
Sure. Hi. My name is Lanny Davidson.
Where are you from, Mr. Davidson?
I was born and raised in Philadelphia. I've been here for 20-something years.
What do you do for a living?
Nothing yet. I'm still in school. I'm a 2L at UCLA. I'm working my way through law school right now. It's pretty hard.
Now, you said that you're a 2L in law school at UCLA. Do you have a classmate named Sam Farnsworth?
He wasn't being aware. We knew each other in undergrad. We met in 2021. And became friends. Moving to LA, it was hard, to be honest with you. The people there are just different. And me and Sam, we talk to each other on the phone all the time.
You said that the two of you talk to each other on the phone all the time. When was the last time you saw him?
Yeah, a few months ago. February 9th, 2025, we we couldn't afford to go to the Super Bowl in New Orleans, so we decided to meet in Philadelphia and watch the game here.
I want to take a step back and I want to walk through what exactly happened that day, okay?
Sure.
If you, at any moment you need a break, just let me know, okay?
I'll help you.
Now, you said that it was the Super Bowl. Where were you and Sam watching the Super Bowl from?
We started at breakfast, we started watching all the pregame stuff, telling each other fly, Eagles fly, and we started bar hopping, bounced all around the city, and we ended up at McGivern's. It's just a few blocks south of here, and that's where we watched the rest of the game and celebrated after.
Nick, you said that you were bar hopping. So were you drinking that day?
Yes, ma'am. Me and Sam, we had a few beers, a few shots. We were celebrating.
Could you tell us what happened when the game first ended?
Sure, it was chaos. That throw by Hurts, we all went outside. It was great. Sam and I, we had a football, we were recreating the throw, screaming at each other, high-fiving strangers. And then that's when we should go try and climb one of those poles, as I've seen so many people do before.
You said that you should go. Hole. Can you tell the members of the jury where you were when you saw that hole?
Both in Chestnut. Walk right outside the courthouse.
Would you recognize a photo of that hole if I were to show it to you?
Yeah, no, I would.
See that binder in front of you? Could you flip to exhibit 36 for me and just let me know when you're there?
Sure. I'm done.
Is that a photo of the hole that we were just talking about?
Yeah.
Is it a fair and accurate copy?
Yeah.
Plaintiff moves exhibit 36 into evidence.
Counsel, have you seen exhibit 36?
I have. We previously looked at this binder and approved it for witness use, and Your Honor, I have no objection.
Okay, the exhibit is admitted. Proceed, counsel.
All right, sir, I want to break down what happened when you said that you wanted to go towards the hole. Did you go towards it?
Yeah. Sam and I, we was it in the city? I went to go look for a better.
You said you went to go look for a better view. Did you try finding that hole?
Yes. And over there was this fence right in front of them.
You mentioned the fence. Is there a fence in that picture?
No, ma'am, this is the pole. There's no fence here.
Would you recognize a photo of that fencing if I were to show it to you?
I would.
And could you flip to one page beforehand, exhibit 35? What are we looking at there?
This is what that pole looked like. The fence right around it looks exactly the same.
Is it a fair and accurate copy of the fencing as you last remember?
Yeah.
Plaintiff moves exhibit 35 to evidence.
Counsel, your response?
No objection, Your Honor. We'd just like to note for the record that while this is accurate to what the fencing looked like, it's not the same what he climbed on February 9th.
Plaintiff's counsel, do you have any response?
That's our understanding as well.
That's fine. Then the exhibit is admitted.
Yes, Your Honor.
Sir, do you mind flipping back to exhibit 36 for a second? The other one?
I don't know.
Now, you said that in that picture, there's no fencing around it. Is the fencing from exhibit 35 accurately depict what the fencing looked like around the pole that you climbed?
Yeah, it is.
All right. So I want to talk about how exactly you were able to climb the pole. Could you point out for the members of the jury which pole in that photo you tried to climb?
Sure. That was this one, right in the middle, 18 feet high. It was a fence right around.
Sir,
Looks like
thank you. Looking at exhibit 36, looking at that pole that you climbed, do you see any signs on that pole that you climbed?
no.
Do you,
There wasn't.
do you see any street lights on it?
Oh man,
Was there anything on that pole that you could reach up into the air to grab onto?
No, ma'am, I couldn't climb that pole.
Sir, you said you couldn't climb that pole. Did you bring some sort of rock climbing kit with you to be able to climb that pole?
No, of course not, no.
Could you describe to the members of the jury how you were able to actually climb that pole then?
Stood myself up on the railing. Look right on. Started to climb.
You said that you started climbing. Now, when you were in Center City, did you see any police officers?
No, ma'am, there was no one there. It was just equal stands everywhere.
All right. Now, when you were before you started climbing that pole and you were boosted yourself up onto that fence, did you hear any police officers tell you to get off of the fence?
Did-
Well, when you started climbing the pole, did you hear or see any police officers telling you to stop climbing?
No, I didn't. I just kept climbing.
Did you make it to the top?
Yes, I did.
When you got to the top, did you hear or see any police officers tell you to come down?
No, it was just Sam. Followed me over that barricade and he was trying to tell me I shouldn't have climbed and I had to go back down.
Sir, what happened when you were at the top of the light here?
I fell right on top of it.
What do you remember happening next?
He was right there on the ground. He wasn't moving. I heard the snap when I fell. You know,
Sorry. I have no further questions.
Thank you, counsel. Defense cross-examination.
Before I proceed, I'm publishing exhibit 35 and 36 to the members of the jury. Would your honor like a courtesy copy?
Yes, please, thank you.
Approaching the bench.
Thank you. It is very fine. Thank you.
May I proceed?
Whenever you're ready.
Good afternoon, Mr. Davidson.
good afternoon.
You're familiar with the Farnsworth family, right?
Me and Sam knew each other for half a decade.
Sam was one of your close friends, right?
Yes, ma'am.
And today you're testifying on behalf of your close friend's family.
Yes, ma'am.
I want to be clear, you were always meant to be a witness for the estate of the Farnsworth, were you?
No. I was sued.
That's
Sam's parents did. Oh, I'm sorry.
all right. That's exactly right. The Farnsworth family sued you, and you were originally a defendant in this case.
That's right.
But you settled with them outside of court, didn't you?
Yeah. They told me they weren't going to sue me. I didn't have any money. Paid them $1, and that's why I'm here.
I want to break up what you just said. Now, for that settlement agreement, you paid the Farnsworth $1.
That's right.
And you said the reason the Farnsworth decided to settle was because you don't have any money?
That's what his mom told me.
And you're aware that now the Farnsworths are suing the city of Philadelphia.
I am.
But that last final contingency of your settlement was that you testified on behalf of the Farnsworth estate.
Yeah. Come in and say what happened. What I did.
Let's talk about what happened. February 9th of this year, 2025, you and Sam, you celebrate the Super Bowl together.
Yes, ma'am.
I want to walk through your day starting at 10 a.m. At 10 a.m., you and Sam decide to go get breakfast, right?
Yeah. Just like we do when we're undergrads.
At breakfast at 10 a.m., you and Sam choose to drink alcohol.
Yes. We started drinking.
At 11 a.m., you and Sam choose to go to Good Dog Bar, right?
Yes.
At Good Dog Bar, you and Sam continue to drink alcohol.
Right. We had a few beers together.
You just said you had a few beers together, but Mr. Davidson, you can't tell the members of this jury how much you drank at the dog bar.
I don't remember, no.
And then at 2 p.m., you and Sam choose to leave Good Dog Bar and go to McGillen's Ale House. Do I have that right?
Yes, ma'am, we drank there too.
Can't tell the members of the jury how much you and Sam drank at McGillen's Ale House, can you?
I don't remember, no.
And then the game ends at around 10 p.m.
Yes, ma'am.
You and Sam are celebrating and run outside of the bar.
Sort of tossing around the football a little bit.
Enjoying the energy of the thousands of people right down on that street.
Yes, ma'am.
And then you chose to go and climb a light pole, right?
Yeah, I did.
On direct examination, you said that it was your idea. I want to be clear, Sam chose to follow you.
We went together, yes.
And when you got there on exhibit 36, there was a metal fence around that, right?
That's what we went to when we got there.
Just like the one on exhibit 35.
Yes, ma'am, it almost looks exactly the same.
You chose to go over this barricade, right?
I stepped on top of it and started running. That's right.
Because I want to be clear. There's no gate or entrance for you to walk through this gate, is there?
No, there's not.
There wasn't a staircase right next to it on February 9th that would allow you to get on top.
Well, there wasn't a staircase, no.
When you got on top of this barricade, did you think the city of Philadelphia wanted you to do that?
No, I was drinking. It was a stupid thing to do.
But it wasn't just your choice, because Sam Farnsworth climbed over the barricade too. Isn't that right?
Yes, ma'am, he did.
Then you start to climb.
Yes, ma'am.
You said it was because of that fence that you were able to reach the top, right?
That's right.
This barricade isn't 18 feet high, is it?
It's not. About 4 feet tall.
And then after you got a 4 feet tall boost, you were actually able to climb your way to the very top of that light pole.
Yes, I was. I got the top.
You chose to climb 18 feet in the air.
Yes, I did it.
And Sam, he didn't leave the barricade while you were still on top, did he?
No, he said he'd spot me. Make sure I was okay.
Sam chose to stay inside that fence.
Stay with me.
He was directly under you as you were at the very top.
Yes, that's when I slipped. I fell. I killed him.
Paramedics arrived at the scene shortly after you fell on top of Sam.
Yes, ma'am. Cops, police, screaming.
Sam was pronounced dead at the scene.
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Davidson, you blame the city of Philadelphia for the death of your friend, don't you?
Of course, ma'am. Yes, I do.
You think the city of Philadelphia should have done more to stop you from climbing 18 feet of a light pole.
Of course I do. Yes.
Chose to climb a light pole at around 10:30 p.m., right?
It's about that time. Yes.
You chose to climb a light pole at 10:30 p.m. when you had been drinking since 10 in the morning.
Yes, it was a stupid decision.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Thank you. Thank you, counsel. Plaintiff, is there any redirect?
No, Your Honor, may I inquire as to how much time? 52 seconds. Thank you. Sir, could you flip back to exhibit 36?
Sure.
Opposing counsel, she just asked you a couple questions about metal fence.
Yeah.
This metal fencing that the city installed, did it act as a barrier for you that night?
I use it to boost myself up onto that hole.
Thank you. Nothing further.
Any recross?
No recross based off that, Your Honor.
Thank you, counsel. The witness stays the time. Yes, counsel.
Before we proceed any further, may I shut the exhibit before the next witness is home?
Sure. And plaintiff's concern, do you have any other witnesses?
No, Your Honor, with that, the plaintiff rests our case.
Okay. Defense, are you ready?
Yes, Your Honor.
You may call your first witness.
Defense calls Walker Edwards to the stand.
Yes, Your Honor. Counsel, you may proceed whenever you're ready.
Yes, Your Honor. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon,
Can you introduce yourself to the members of the jury?
everyone. My name is Brian Walker. I'm the Director of Public Safety for the City of Philadelphia.
How long have you been the Director of Public Safety for the City of Philadelphia?
It's been just under a decade. I started back in 2018.
Could you explain exactly what the Director of Public Safety is?
Well, as the Director of Public Safety, as the title might imply, it's my job to make sure that the public is safe. For every major sporting event or major celebration in general that the City of Philadelphia might have, it's my job to put together a plan, make sure that we have precautions in place.
You just specifically mentioned sporting events. What happens in Philadelphia during sporting events?
Anyone that lives in Philadelphia knows that there's a major sport when the city goes a little wild. Especially if it has anything to do with the Eagles or the Phillies going to the Super Bowl or the World Series. I don't know, Sixers, because they don't have it.
Can you be more specific what you mean by that they go crazy?
Well, it was a big win for one of those teams. Philadelphians stream into the streets and start celebrating. And sometimes they celebrate a little too hard. We're talking climbing on top of cars, lamp posts, and sometimes even breaking into storefronts.
Have you ever implemented any precautions to prevent people from being able to climb light posts?
I have, of course. Back in 2018, when the Eagles went to the Super Bowl for the first time, we started to grease the poles to make it harder to climb.
Was greasing the poles in 2018 effective?
Not 100%, but despite the fact that we greased the poles with Crisco oil, people still found a way to climb the poles.
Are you
Objection, Your Honor, to relevance, if I may be heard.
Sure, go ahead.
Your Honor, the fact that in 2018, they took precautions to prevent people from climbing the poles by greasing them doesn't make any fact more or less likely in today's case.
Defense counsel, your response.
Yes, Your Honor. We'll go on to talk about, if I may proffer,
Sure.
why the city changed from greasing the poles to those metal barricades, which are relevant in today's case. This is just foundation.
Counsel, your response.
Your Honor, in that case, Your Honor, this is improper character evidence, if I may.
Sure.
They're using this to show that in 2018, they acted carefully, that they did so for this Super Bowl. They're using it for propensity purposes, and that's not admissible.
Counsel, I appreciate the objection, but I'm going to overrule it. I will allow the testimony to continue.
Yes, Your Honor. Now, you just mentioned that people were still able to climb the poles. Have you seen news footage from when the Phillies won in 2022 of talking about that celebration?
Absolutely. Once the Phillies clinched the World Series of 2022, the same exact thing happened.
Your Honor, let the record reflect, I'm showing plaintiff counsel. It's an electronic exhibit, it's just the beginning of this video.
Okay.
Now, Mr. Edwards, I'm just gonna show you the first 5 seconds and let me know if you recognize it.
To Center City, where fans started to gather almost after the Phillies.
Do you recognize this news footage?
I do, yes. I was in the city when this happened, and as for public safety, I make it my job to be aware of this
Does it look altered or edited from just those first 5 seconds that you saw?
No, looks the same.
Defense offers exhibit 40 in evidence.
Plaintiff's counsel.
Yes, Your Honor, to hearsay. This video is an out-of-court statement they're using for the truth.
Counsel, your response.
Your Honor, nothing that's mentioned in this footage are we going to use for the truth of the matter asserted, but rather we're just going to show the footage itself, just a quick 10 seconds to show fans physically climb up the poles.
Counsel, your response.
Your Honor, in that case, if they could just limit that to that specific part and we constructively strike the rest of the video, we'd be happy for that.
Okay, counsel, do you plan to limit to just the relevant section? It's just a few seconds, is that correct?
Yes, Your Honor, 11 seconds.
Okay, well then I will sustain the objection, but allow the defense to use the exhibit. Just briefly, the few seconds that are necessary that are not objectionable.
Yes, Your Honor.
Yeah, as well. You can use it with the witness and then you're gonna have to.
Yes. Is the jury and the witness, are you able to see this?
Swing a little bit.
Your Honor, would it be all right for me to reposition myself as well to make sure that? Thank you.
Let the record reflect I'm starting the footage at 1 minute and 17 seconds.
To make sure fans celebrated safely. Toilet paper flying.
Objection, Your Honor. At this point, I'd like to raise my objection, if I may.
Yes.
Your Honor, they said that they were using this only for the portion in which people were climbing up the grease poles. As we can see, the portion that was just shown to the jury did not include that, and it included beyond what Your Honor had agreed on.
Your Honor, this clip right here shows that we're about to get into it. It was just a few seconds.
Right, okay, then I will sustain the objection in that the bit about toilet paper is stricken.
Yes, Your Honor.
I think we can start with where this guy appears to be climbing up the pole.
Yes.
That would be omitted.
Not twice, but multiple times to celebrate this victory.
Now, in 2022, in that footage where the fans are climbing up the poles, had you greased them?
We had, like I mentioned, first we started with grizzle oil, then we tried hydraulic fluid, and we even tried biodegradable gear oil, but every single time people found a way to climb those poles.
Well, let's move on and talk about today's case, specifically the Super Bowl. Do you remember what day that was?
Every Philadelphian remembers what day that was. It was February 9th, 2025.
Were there any safety precautions that you had implemented to the city in case the Eagles did win?
Of course, we had a whole list of things that we put in place to make the city safe.
Like what?
Well, for starters, we blocked off large swaths of Center City to traffic, specifically the area around City Hall. We also had increased police presence that night to make sure that the police could monitor the situation. And we put fences around every single hall.
Had you greased the poles that night?
No, we did not.
How come?
Like I mentioned before, people could still find out how to climb the pole, even if it were greased. We had reports of people bringing towels and wiping the grease off, and we had reports of people trying to climb those poles.
Objection, Your Honor, to hearsay. May I be heard? Your Honor, what this witness stated are referencing specific reports that they heard, and that knowledge is based off of the hearsay contained from those reports that people were actually slipping off of those poles.
Counsel, your response.
Yes, Your Honor. This is admissible because in prior testimony, Mr. Edwards testified that people were in fact slipping off the poles and it was dangerous. This testimony has already hit the record. Just because now he's referencing as an exhibit doesn't make it any less admissible. The bell has already been rung, Your Honor. This objection is untimely.
Your response.
Your Honor, it wasn't just, we don't have a court reporter here today, but Your Honor, it wasn't just that what opposing counsel just stated that the witness said. The witness included multiple accounts of what came from various reports, and they're absolutely using those reports for the truth of the matter asserted. That is definitionally hearsay, and it's not admissible.
Okay, I appreciate the objection. I'm going to overrule and allow the testimony to continue.
Yes, Your Honor. You've also mentioned metal barricades. Would you recognize a photo of the barricades you had put in place for the city?
I would, yes.
I'm approaching plaintiff counsel with a copy of what's already been admitted as Exhibit 36. I'm approaching the witnesses. Do you recognize what I just handed you?
Yeah, this is a picture of one of the metal fences that we put around poles to try to prevent people from reaching the pole itself.
Can you explain your thought process on why you believed that these fences would be effective?
Well, like I just mentioned, it's supposed to physically stop people from reaching the poles. And at a minimum, it's a clear indication that you are not supposed to go towards the pole in the first place.
Any implementations to try to prevent people from pole climbing since you've been the director of security 100% stopped fans from being able to climb the poles?
No, nothing has 100% stopped Eagles fans, Phillies fans, or anyone in Philadelphia for that matter from being able to climb those poles. We've tried grease, we've tried fences. Fact of the matter is, if someone chooses to climb that pole, they might find a way to do it.
Do you know how many people you were expecting to be in that celebration on Super Bowl Sunday?
We expected that there'd be about 100,000 people in the city after the Super Bowl.
Thank you. I have no further questions. I'm approaching to retrieve evidence.
Okay, thank you. Plaintiff's counsel, cross-examination,
Yes, Your Honor.
whenever you're ready.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Sir, I want to start off by talking about what your job is. Because like you mentioned, you're the Director of Public Safety.
That's correct.
You testified that it was my job to make sure people are safe.
Absolutely. Like I mentioned, I'm the director of public safety.
You said it's my job to make sure precautions were taken.
That's correct. And like I mentioned, those precautions included shutting down traffic, fences, and increasing police presence.
So I want to talk about whether or not you actually did that. But first, I want to take a step back and talk a little bit about what these sports events in Philly can look like. Because like you mentioned on direct examination, these events can get a little bit rough, right?
Absolutely. I mentioned that while most people might be celebrating peacefully, there are some people that take it too far.
Exactly. They start climbing things, don't they?
That's correct.
They start climbing garbage trucks.
We have had reports of that.
They start climbing bus stops.
That has also happened.
They start climbing poles, right?
That's correct. That's what happens most frequently. It's become some sort of Philadelphia tradition that we're trying to stop.
Now, one of the precautionary measures you talked about was that you put some fences around, right?
That's correct. We put metal fences around all the light posts to,
Oh, continue.
sorry, we put metal fences around the light posts to try to stop people from reaching the post itself.
So I'm showing you Exhibit 35, Your Honor, it's already in evidence. And this is an example of the fencing you put up.
That's correct.
Sir, when you put this fencing around the poles, did you ever consider the fact that, the fans would try and climb the fence?
We did consider that. Like I mentioned, never found anything that 100% stops people from getting to those poles. At a minimum, like I mentioned, that kind of fence is an indication that you're not supposed to go towards the pole itself.
So I want to talk about the other precautionary measures you mentioned, because you mentioned that you increased the police, right?
Correct. We're police officers every 2 blocks within Center City.
All right, let's break that down, because in total, there were 200 police officers in Center City onto the Super Bowl, right?
That's right.
Just 2 weeks before the Super Bowl, it was the NFC championships, right?
That's correct. When we beat the Commanders.
That's right. And at that championship game, there were 80,000 Eagles fans in Center City, right?
That number's accurate, yes.
And on that night, there were 75 reports of people climbing poles, right?
That is true, yes.
In fact, somebody died, right?
That is true. Unfortunately, a man named Nasir Muldrow climbed a pole during the NFC Championship celebration and fell to his death.
So on the day that there were 80,000 fans in Philadelphia, you had 200 police officers, right?
That's correct. For every single major sporting event we've had in the past couple of years, we use 200 police officers to cover.
So those 200 police officers, you'd agree with me that they weren't enough to be able to stop that one person from dying, were they?
I don't know if I exactly say that. There were 200 police officers and someone did die, but I can't speculate as to whether that person wouldn't have died if there were.
Well, all right, to the best of your knowledge, The police officers were not able to prevent that man from climbing up the pole, were they?
But no, that man still climbed the pole that.
So then, sir, you'd agree with me that you knew that just 2 weeks later, 20,000 more people would show up for the Super Bowl, right?
That was our estimate. Obviously, we considered the fact that the Super Bowl would bring a larger crowd.
All right, so even though you estimated that there would be 100,000 people in Center City, you still kept 200 cops, right?
That's right. It's the same number we used in 2018, 2022, and 2023.
I wasn't asking about what you did in the past. I was asking what you did on the Super Bowl. And on the Super Bowl, 100,000 Eagles fans, 200 cops, right?
Yes,
Let's do some math. You agree with me that that means that one cop responsible for 500 Philadelphians?
that's correct.
Okay. So I want to talk more about what you were doing that day. Because, sir, you agree with me that you saw from your hotel room what was going on there.
Absolutely. We saw that there were a lot of people in the streets. Yes,
You took a picture of what was going on, right?
I did.
You took a picture from your hotel room at the Ritz-Carlton, right?
That's correct.
You recognize that photo you took if I were to show it to you?
I'd have to see it, but I probably would. Yes,
That binder in front of you, could you flip to exhibit 34?
I can. Just give me one moment.
Sir, that's a fair and accurate copy of the photo that you took, right?
That's correct.
Hasn't been changed or altered in any way since you last saw it.
No, this is the same.
Plaintiff moves exhibit 34 into evidence.
Counsel, any objections?
No objection, Your Honor.
Okay, 34 is moved into evidence.
Now, you'd agree with me that looking at this picture, well, there's two different groups of people carrying stoplights, right?
I do see that. Yes.
There are several people sitting on top of a garbage truck.
Yes, that's like I mentioned. Sometimes fans took it too far.
The metal barriers that you talked about earlier, there are people literally moving them in that picture, right?
That's correct. Yes.
Sir, do you see any police officers in that picture?
I'd have to. There's a lot of people in this picture, counselor. I'd have to look.
Well, sir, you'd agree with me that even if there were police officers in that picture, it wasn't enough to prevent people from carrying stoplights, was it?
I guess not. No, there still is a group carrying stoplights. If they were stopped after this picture was taken, I don't know.
Sir, do you still believe today that the security plan to only have 200 police officers was enough?
It was what we had deemed was enough for all of the years prior, so that's why we put that same plan in place.
Sir, you'd agree with me that 2 blocks away from this picture, that's where Sam Farnsworth died.
That's correct. Sam Farnsworth died when a fan decided to climb a pole and fell off.
So that's a yes to the question that I asked you. 2 blocks away from this picture, Sam Farnsworth died.
Yeah, that's what I just said.
Nothing further. Permission to publish exhibit 34 to the jury?
Yes, permission granted. Is there any redirect?
1 moment. How much time do I have left?
1:30.
Yes, Your Honor.
Sure. Whenever you're ready.
Mr. Edwards, under cross-examination, you were asked about someone that died in January of this year. Do you remember that?
I do, yes.
Were there any precautions the city did differently from January at the NFC Championship celebration to February for the Super Bowl celebration?
Yes, there was. But because of that death that took place on January 26th, that's the reason we put all of those fences around the posts for the Super Bowl 2 weeks later.
In January, were there any fences?
No, there was none.
Thank you, Your Honor. I have no further questions.
Okay, thank you. Plaintiff, is there any recross?
No recross based off that, Your Honor.
Okay.
With that, Your Honor, the defense rests our case in chief and are ready for closing arguments.
Okay. Before we go into closing arguments, would plaintiff defense want any of their exhibits back? Are you planning on using them or?
May I permission to retrieve exhibit 34 from one of the jury members?
Defense, if you need to retrieve anything?
I think we're okay, Your Honor.
Okay. All right. Then plaintiff, you may proceed with your closing argument whenever you're.
It's Jon. May I inquire as to how much time I have?
You have 7 minutes.
Before I begin with closing arguments, I'd like to read out a portion of pre-admitted exhibit 3. It's the autopsy report.
Okay, Counselor, is there any objection?
Yes, Your Honor, simply because the record at this point has been closed. Plaintiff rests their case in chief, as did the defense.
Right.
Your Honor, in that case, I'll use it during those arguments. If it's
Okay, because it was
pre-admitted.
pre-admitted, is that
Yeah.
correct? Right. Objections sustained. Counselor, proceed with your closing whenever you're ready.
May I please report? It wasn't a bear. It was a boost. It is a city's responsibility to keep people safe. Director of Public Safety took the stand today and literally told you. He told you, it is my job to make sure people are safe. He took the stand, looked you in the eye and said, it is my job to make sure precautions were taken. We're not saying that it's their responsibility to predict every single possible thing that could maybe happen to some person in Philadelphia. What we were asking them to do is use their common sense. Remember the past. You learned today that the city of Philadelphia, their memory didn't even last 2 weeks. You heard that just 2 weeks before the Super Bowl, another young man climbed up a pole. Another young man fell off of that pole. He died. And even though the city knew that people were climbing poles, they did not take proper precautions to protect. They didn't create proper barriers. All they did was give people the boost that they needed. I expect opposing counsel to get up here and tell you, we're asking you to ignore the decisions that Mr. Davidson made that night. We're not telling you it was a good idea to climb up a pole. Nobody's telling you that. But what we are telling you is that it is not reasonable for a city who knows that their people love to climb things. I mean, he told you, people in the city love to climb things. They climb everything they can. Garbage trucks, bus stops, poles. They know people are climbing things. And you heard today, they literally put up a step stool for people to climb onto so they could jump on, climb some more. In what world is that acting reasonably, members of the jury? Certainly not this one. In this world, that's what we call negligence, and that is why the estate of Sam Farnsworth has brought this case to court today. Now, in doing so, I told you at the beginning of today's trial, it meant that we walked in with a burden of. We had to prove by the preponderance of the evidence, more likely than not, that the city of Philadelphia was negligent and their negligence caused his death. We did our job today. And we did so by showing you the barriers, showing you the boost. So let's talk about the barrier that they failed to implement. Because you heard today, we took precautionary measures. We had an increased police force. You heard today that there were 200 police officers. Who cares whether or not they were spread out across 2 different blocks, maybe 40 of them up here, maybe 40 of them there. There were still 100,000 Eagles fans, 100,000 potentially intoxicated Eagles fans roaming around that city, and what? They had 200 cops there? We know people were intoxicated. You heard today during the cross-examination of Mr. Davidson that people were drinking. Of course they could predict people were drinking, and they still what? They only brought 200 police officers? Members of the jury, the ratio is horrible here. That's 1 police officer for every 500 Eagles fans. That is insane. I mean, how many of you have ever babysat before? So seriously, members of the jury, do you really think that the city was acting reasonably when they when they put 200 police officers in charge of protecting 100,000 people, they even knew that wasn't a good idea. Because 2 weeks beforehand, in the same city, 80,000 people showed up. One person climbed up a pole and one person died, and guess what? The police weren't able to do anything. Now, instead, they told you, oh, we put up these barriers. But you heard today that those barriers that they put up, they weren't even real barriers. You heard today that these barriers were the perfect height for Mr. Davidson to step over, climb onto, and boost himself up onto a pole so he could climb 18 feet into the air. Sure, maybe it was his decision to do that. But guess what? It wasn't the city's job to give him the boost to be able to do that, and that's exactly what they did today. Now, today, the plaintiff, the defense, they brought an affirmative defense as well. They brought an affirmative defense. Now, what that means is they had to prove to you by the preponderance of the evidence, more likely than not, that people were negligent, and that somebody else's negligence is what caused their death. They weren't able to do that today, because you heard today it was the city who was responsible. It was the city who decided to put in those barriers that they knew could be dangerous, knew that people could climb onto. Because when Lanny Davidson fell off the top of that, hit his head, it was the fence that the city installed whose head cracked his skull open. Look at the autopsy. Members of the jury. Decedent standing on a public sidewalk with another individual fell 18 feet above him, landing on decedent and causing decedent's head to strike metal fencing. If that metal fencing weren't there, Mr. Farnsworth wouldn't have hit his head off. Now, I understand. We're not asking you. I understand that today's case, it might seem like it's been complicated. You've heard a lot about different precautionary measures that may or may not have been taken. You've heard a lot about different bans, different types of precautionary measures, greasing the poles, putting out different fences. But what you can remember when you go back in that jury room to deliberate is that the city didn't do enough. It was their job to do the bare minimum, and they didn't even do that. When the bare minimum is a bad idea, that is what we call negligence. Final.
Thank you, Costa. Thanks, Costa, you may come with your closing
Yes, Your Honor.
whenever you're ready.
May it please the court. Members of the jury. Plaintiff counsel, we, the city of Philadelphia, placed barriers in front of Rutgers. But it was Lanny Davidson and Sam Farnsworth who chose to use that barrier as a boost. Mr. Davidson told you. When he saw that barrier, he didn't think it was an invitation. He chose to break the rules. This piece is simple. The city had safety precautions, and people chose to cross the line. Sam and Lanny chose to cross the line by entering that barricade, by standing underneath his friend as he's climbing and reaching the top. And it's tragic that Lanny slipped and fell. It's tragic that Sam passed away. Members of the jury, as callous as it may sound, life is full of choices. Plaintiff counsel talked about police and babysitting. But Sam and Lanny weren't children. Sam and Lanny were adults with free will, and with free will comes sometimes suffering the consequences of your own actions. And no matter how tragic it is, It was Sam and Lanny's choice, and Sam and Lanny's choice alone, to enter that barricade, to break the law. This wasn't a boost. It was a barrier meant to keep the citizens safe. As a plaintiff, we want you to find that the city of Philadelphia is the sole party responsible for Sam Farnsworth. But they had to prove it. They had to prove to you by a greater weight of the evidence that the city did not act reasonably. And their argument for that was that having these barriers were dangerous. Plaintiff counsel didn't tell you what they wanted instead of these barriers. She told you the city didn't do enough, but she didn't tell you what they were supposed to do. Every year since 2018, there have been 200 police officers. The only difference was that Sam and Lanny chose to climb the pole, and it was a tragic accident. But that doesn't mean the city is responsible. The plaintiff didn't meet that burden. They had to prove to you that because the city wasn't reasonable, they were the cause of Sam's death. Members of the jury, no one forced Sam into that barrier. No one grabbed his arm and pulled him in there, no one trapped him inside and said, "You stay here." He made a conscious decision, and unfortunately, and tragically he suffered the consequences. Let me remind you who the state originally sued. The original lawsuit was the very witness the plaintiff called to the stand today. Lanny Davidson, the person who actually fell on top of Sam. But the reason he's not sitting at this table with the city of Philadelphia today is because he is a 2L in law school and has no money. So what they chose to do is they said, "You'll testify for us, you'll say it's the city's fault, and you pay us $1. That's why they chose to sue the city, because the city had more money, but they thought that it was Lanny who was responsible. That's their choice. But they failed to prove it. Now, because of that, they failed to prove that it was the city who was responsible. When you consider all the evidence of the barricades, of climbing to the top of the light pole, you see that it was Sam and Lanny's choice to cross the line. So that's why, at the end of today's trial, when you go back to deliberate, you'll have this verdict form. You'll be asked to consider all the evidence that came out today, all the evidence of the police officers, of the barricades, of the 200 officers stationed over 2 or 3 blocks. And you'll be asked, who do you find negligent? And although it's a hard decision, the law requires you to set your emotions, to set your feelings to the side. Because again, no one's trying to convince you that Sam's death wasn't tragic. But you're required by the law to say who was responsible. And that's why, based on the evidence and the facts, we urge him to say no to the city of Philadelphia and find them not liable. Thank you.
Thank you, Constance. Plaintiff's attorney, do you have any rebuttal?
May I first, Jon Shanahan? Yeah, 30,000. Thank you. They knew people could climb these poles. They knew people could die from that, and they knew people would climb onto those barriers because they were never barriers. They were boosts. Find the city of Philadelphia negligent because they didn't take care of their own people. Hold them accountable. Thank you.
Thank you, counsel. Bill could give us a moment to complete our scoring and submit our scorecards.
Here.